Welcome to Musings with me. I'm Lisa, and I hope that wherever this finds you in your day, it finds you with the love and blessings it is intended with. So enjoy this episode, and I'll catch you on the other side. Welcome to Musings with me at Butterfly Effect. I'm Lisa, and I'm really glad you're here today. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, I hope this finds you well, maybe even gets you thinking about some important stuff. This is a topic I've been wanting to discuss for quite some time. I've mulled over it long enough, and here it is. Today's topic is addiction, specifically alcohol use and addiction, though, you know what, let's not forget the many other addictions that can sneak into our lives, like food, caffeine, screens, social media, gambling, even addiction to our own stories and illnesses. We become addicted to telling them. So addiction is more than just a bad habit. It's a deep, compulsive need that can take over your life, and it affects your mind, your body, your relationships. And whether it's alcohol or another substance or behavior, addiction is like a cracked mirror. It distorts how we see ourselves and the world around us. But beneath that distortion, there's actually often a deeper pain that we're trying to numb or escape from. So I want to start by sharing some personal stories, and not to call anyone out, but to show how addiction can touch all of us. In my life, I've seen it in my family, my friends, clients, and of course myself. It's everywhere. When I first moved from New Zealand to Australia, I noticed a big difference in drinking culture. It was like stepping onto a new merry-go-round, one where the speed was like cranked way up. Here, binge drinking seems to be part of the social fabric, like woven into celebrations and weekends. For me, it showed up in various ways, like how I would take a piccolo of wine, you know, those little mini bottles of bubbly, and I'd take it in the car so that I could have a drink while my husband drove after dropping off a wedding cake. Or I would have a full bottle or two of wine after cakes were picked up. The stress of needing it to be perfect would have me peaking, and a wine or four would help me come down after it was all set up. So the first glass, you know, it hardly even hit the sides, and I'd feel like I hadn't even had one. And then the next one would go down, and I'd feel a little bit of that relief start to spread over, and another one, and my body would start to relax. And I remember often having in my head, I'd have that Pink Floyd song Comfortably Numb run through my head as I felt that wine flood through and give me that space to relax and stop thinking. So in the past, prior to that, it was things like coming home from work after teaching, after family dramas, to help lubricate a stressful social gathering with people I didn't know, because like that's a good idea. And like to top it off, everyone around me was doing a similar thing. Have a wine or drinks after work to relieve the stress, or to help with finding the mutual ground in a relationship, because then you don't have to address the stuff that's really going on if you just lube it with booze. And I'm going to just chuck in some stats here for you, taken from the Aussie Bureau of Statistics. Did you know that in 2020 to 21, 1 in 4 Australians aged 18 years and over exceeded the Australian adult alcohol guideline? That's like a quarter of the population. If they were all telling the truth, of course. So men were more likely than women to exceed the guideline at 36% compared to 18.5%. And people in Australia were almost twice as likely as those born overseas to exceed the guideline. So 30% compared to 17%. The guidelines alone are to be questioned. No more than 10 standard drinks a week, or no more than 4 standard drinks a day. When did it become okay to have 4 drinks a day? I had issues with alcohol, and I wasn't drinking daily. However, I was binge drinking. So when I stopped drinking, the biggest change wasn't just how much better I felt physically, but how much alcohol had been a crutch for dealing with stress. It was my way of unwinding after that busy day or calming down after a stressful event. But here's the thing: alcohol was only masking the stress, not resolving it. In fact, it was actually making life worse. So around 2018, it turned into an anxiousness, like a cat on a hot tin roof kind of feeling for the remainder of the week after the bingy weekends. I wasn't an everyday drinker, like I said, but I was a binge drinker, and that was putting stress on my liver with having to detox my system. What I didn't want to know was that it was screwing with my liver. So for a long time, there were the standard side effects of feeling crappy in the morning, looking for greasy carbs and coffee, and the headache that came with it. However, eventually, this would turn into an inability to drink at all. So without having what felt like an allergic reaction to drinking. And I can tell you, I looked for ways to overcome that by not drinking alcohol with additives and all sorts of things. But I would still have an overwhelming feeling of dread afterwards. And one of the things I noticed after giving up alcohol is just how deeply it's woven into the fabric of our social lives. It's like a thread that runs through nearly every gathering. So much so that we don't even realize it until we're not participating any longer. So whether it's a casual barbecue, a celebration dinner, or even something as seemingly wholesome or interesting as a paint and sip event, alcohol is almost always at the center. And when you step away from drinking, you start to see how often social events are organized around it, with little to zero consideration for those who don't drink. It's not just about being left out. It's about the assumption that alcohol is a given, leaving those who choose not to or can't drink feeling like an afterthought. This experience has really got me thinking about how we can shift our social priorities. What if our gatherings were less about the drink in our hands and more about the connections we're building? Honestly, how would our relationships change if we focused on the joy of being together rather than the buzz of alcohol? It's something we need to start considering more seriously, because the way things are now, we're excluding a whole load of people, whether they're in recovery, pregnant, on medication, or simply choosing a different path. If we can start to make that shift, we might just find that our social lives become so much richer, so much more inclusive, and ultimately more fulfilling. Some of my early experiences with alcohol were at family and friends events where heavy drinking was the norm. As a kid and as a teen, it seemed funny to see adults acting silly. But then there were times when it wasn't so funny, like when a family member became aggressive after drinking. It was terrifying because that wasn't what I knew from home. I've come to realize that while some behavior was tolerated, it wasn't truly accepted. And as I grew older, I saw how alcohol was everywhere, especially in families where drinking was a daily ritual. It was normal for some of my friends' parents to supply alcohol to teens, almost like it was a rite of passage. This social acceptance makes it easy for young people to start drinking before they're actually even old enough to understand the consequences of doing so. And I'll give you another example. When I was 15, I went out with a friend who had left school for work celebrations. Not that my mother knew what would be going down with this. I was plied with alcohol by other staff members from this friend's workmates who kept refilling my drinks. And that night ended with me so drunk that I threw up in multiple cars and then all night at home. My mum stayed up all night checking on me. Looking back, I wonder, was it my responsibility to keep myself safe? Or was it the responsibility of the adults around me? In hindsight, I believe it was the responsibility of all the adults that night to protect a 15-year-old girl from becoming severely intoxicated. And no one thought to do that. And now I see that being replicated in southeast Queensland. So binge drinking seems almost ingrained in the culture, starting young and continuing through events like what I just described for myself, but also Schoolies Week, where teens are encouraged, sometimes by their own parents, to drink excessively. It's supposed to be a celebration for the ending of school. And too often it ends in alcohol-related injuries and sometimes even deaths. And while there are organisations like Red Frogs who are doing an amazing job trying to provide safer spaces, the underlying issue remains. Why do we celebrate by getting so drunk that we're too intoxicated to even enjoy the party? And addiction isn't just a personal struggle either. Think of all those teens who are at schoolies, who are around their friends, who are choosing actually not to be drunk. It's something that affects everyone around us. It's not just us. And I've seen families where addiction is passed down like an unwanted heirloom almost, with each generation inheriting the same struggles and pain of that previous generation. It's heartbreaking, but it's also a reminder of how important it is to break that cycle. So why do we as a society think it's normal to numb our emotions with alcohol instead of dealing with them head on? Louise Hay, who talks about metaphysical well-being, said it really well. Heavy dependence on anything outside of self is addiction. Being addicted is giving up my power to a substance or a habit, and I can always take my power back. So somewhere along the way, we've lost our power. We're trying to numb, avoid, or ignore that something deep inside us. If we were truly happy and living the lives that we envision for ourselves, would we still feel the need to drink to relax, to calm down, to escape? Sure, alcohol makes it easier to let loose, to speak our minds, or to connect with others. It's like removing that filter. When you have that alcohol, the filter disappears. The things that maybe you really think or really wish you could say, you can say. You can walk up to those people who maybe you couldn't have done that with previously. But that begs that question then, what is missing from our lives that we need this social lubrication? What would it take for us to feel confident enough to do these things without alcohol? See, the problem with using alcohol or any other addiction as a coping mechanism is that if the effects wear off, the underlying pain and shame and anxiety and guilt is still there. We're not solving anything. We're just covering it up. And eventually that cover wears thin. It's time to start learning how to be kind and compassionate towards ourselves as we navigate this journey. Addiction isn't some moral failing. It's a coping mechanism that for many was learned at a young age. We need to treat ourselves and others struggling with addiction with the kindness we'd offer a friend in pain. We need to find our inner buzz as the addict without that external crutch. I'm not saying give up alcohol completely, But if that's what it takes to become a better version of yourself, what have you got to lose? Maybe, just maybe, you'll gain a more fulfilling life, one where you're fully present and fully you. So, what in your life are you using to avoid becoming that full potential of you? What are you numbing that you don't want to face? And what could change if you got the support you need to make a shift? This is just the beginning of that conversation. We need to start asking these questions, not just of ourselves, but of our society as a whole. If you're looking for a sign to start having an open conversation around addiction, let this be your feather. Let this be that light brush to open up your awareness. Start having the conversation. Don't wait for the brick or the truck to hit you. Take your power back and start that conversation today. What will you choose to make a difference in your life and the lives of those around you? Because this affects more than you. This affects your family, your friends, your connections, your children, and further out than that. I hope this lands with the intention it's meant, with love, with understanding, and a really good dose of when are you going to do it? Because tomorrow never comes. If you need support with this, see the podcast description below for the services that are available. And they are DrinkWise support services, Lifeline Text 13YARN, YARN, and Alcoholics Anonymous. And there's more online. Check your state, check your country, and see what help is out there and available for you. It is never too late to start and make a change in your life. Lots of love from me. May this land for you with the intention it is meant with love, with understanding, and with a good dose of when the bleep are you going to do it, because tomorrow never comes. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in as always. And I'm sending mountains of love to you. Take care, and I'll catch you on the next one.